Hey guys, in today's video, we will hear a stunning account of a near-death experience experienced by Seraphine Holloway, a story that reveals surprising truths about spirituality and the destiny of Christian souls. You will be surprised by the revelations and teachings she brought from this experience. Before we start, let us know in the comments which city you are from, and if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, take the opportunity to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Hello, my name is Seraphine Holloway. I never thought I would be here telling this story, but I feel like I need to share what happened to me. You know, when we go through something so intense, so transformative, that keeping it to yourself seems wrong. That's exactly how I feel about my near-death experience. It happened in 1982 in New Orleans, a city that has always been my home. It's funny how we live in a place full of stories about the supernatural, voodoo, and all kinds of mysticism, but we never pay much attention to it, you know? I was like that. I've always been that kind of person with my feet on the ground, who needs to see it to believe it. Stories about spirits, the afterlife, and supernatural experiences, they weren't for me. I respected those who believed, of course, but I preferred to keep my distance from these things. That night, I had gone out with my boyfriend Graham to see a movie. It was a night like any other, or at least it should have been. I remember the movie was good and we were walking home, talking excitedly about the scenes we liked most. The streets were quiet, it was late, and the air had that characteristic New Orleans humidity. It all happened very quickly. One moment I was laughing at something Graham had said. The next moment my life changed forever. A motorcycle appeared from I don't know where, at high speed. There was no time to react. There was no time for Graham to shout a warning. There was no time for anything. I just felt the impact, that brutal force hitting me, and then something came that no words could adequately describe. People always ask if it hurt. Honestly, the impact, yes, it was as if my entire body had been crushed in a second, but then came a totally different feeling. It was as if, suddenly, I was watching a scene from a movie. I could see my body lying on the asphalt. I could see Graham desperate next to me. I could see the motorcyclist a few meters away, also fallen, but I wasn't there anymore, not really. It was as if my consciousness, my essence, whatever you want to call it, had left my body and was floating above it all. This was just the first part of an experience that would completely change my outlook on life, death, and everything in between. When you float out of your own body, the first reaction is total panic. I mean, nothing in life prepares you for something like that. I was there looking down, seeing my boyfriend trying to wake me up, seeing people starting to gather around, hearing someone scream that they had called an ambulance, but at the same time, I wasn't really there. And then, in the blink of an eye, it all disappeared. When I say everything, I mean everything. The street, the people, the city lights, the sounds, they were simply gone. I found myself plunged into the deepest darkness you can imagine. Do you know when you close your eyes tightly, still you see some points of light, some colors? But this was different. It was complete, absolute darkness, which seemed to swallow not only light, but also any sense of space or time. The feeling is difficult to explain, but I'll try. It was like I was floating in an infinite ocean of darkness. There was no up or down, right or left. All the references we use to locate ourselves in the world simply no longer existed. The scariest thing is that I was still aware of myself, of my thoughts, but I no longer felt my body. There was no more heartbeat, no more breathing, no more that familiar feeling of being inside a physical body. The fear I felt in that moment was unlike anything I have ever experienced in my life. It wasn't like the fear of heights or the fear of some physical danger. It was a deep, existential fear that came from the perception of being completely alone in that immense void. It was as if every certainty I had about my own existence was being questioned. I tried to scream, but there was no sound. I tried to move, but there was nowhere to go. Time seemed to not exist there. It could have been seconds, minutes, or hours. It's impossible to say. At that moment, I began to think that maybe this was death, this eternal emptiness, this absolute loneliness. That was when the panic began to give way to a quiet desperation, a reluctant acceptance that perhaps this was my destiny. But then, just as I was about to give in completely to that dark thought, something changed. It was subtle at first, so subtle that I thought I was imagining things. But little by little it became clearer that there was something different in that darkness. A change was coming, and with it, An even more extraordinary experience was about to begin. Then something happened that I will never forget. In the midst of that absolute darkness, a tiny point of light appeared in the distance. At first, I thought I was imagining things. You know when you look into the dark for a long time, and you start to see bright spots. That's what I thought it was, but it wasn't. This light was different. It was real as the darkness that enveloped me. It was like a small golden star, reminiscent of that first star that appears in the evening sky. It was neither bright nor dazzling. In fact, it was soft, delicate even, like the light of a very distant candle. The color, it was somewhere between gold and pearly white, a shade I had never seen before, and honestly never seen again after. So it's so beautiful, I remember thinking, and my own consciousness seemed to echo in that void. It was the first time I felt like I could still speak, even without having a physical voice. The light seemed to respond to my presence, pulsing gently, as if it was recognizing me too. The most extraordinary thing was the heat that emanated from her. It wasn't physical heat. It wasn't like being near a fire or feeling the sun on your skin. It was a different kind of heat, something that warmed the very soul. Imagine that good feeling you get when someone you love hugs you very much. It was something like that, but multiplied by 1,000. I immediately felt an overwhelming urge to get closer. It was as if every part of my being knew that there, in that light, was everything I had always searched for without knowing it. That's where I needed to go. I tried to move towards him, but it was like being paralyzed. Please, I found myself begging, and I need to get there. It was at that moment that I felt it. At first it was just a subtle feeling, like when you know someone is watching you, but you can't see who it is. Then the presence became stronger, more defined. It was as if someone, or something, was right next to me. "Don't be afraid," I heard, but not with my ears. It was a voice that sounded directly in my consciousness. She was gentle, welcoming, and brought with her a peace I had never experienced before. It was as if every word was made of pure love and understanding. "You are safe," the presence continued. "There is much you need to see and understand." I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Who was it? Why was I there? What was that light? But before he could formulate any of them, the presence responded, "All your questions will be answered. But first, you must see beyond what your earthly eyes were accustomed to seeing." The feeling of peace emanating from that presence was so profound that my previous fear began to dissipate. It was as if I was, for the first time in my life, completely safe, completely supported. There, between the darkness and that distant point of light, with that serene presence at my side, I began to understand that I was about to experience something that would forever change my understanding of life, death, and everything that exists beyond them. "Are you ready?" the presence asked, and even though I didn't know exactly what for, I knew I was. It was then that my perception began to expand. It's hard to explain, but it's as if my spiritual eyes were adjusting to the environment. At first it was just fuzzy shadows, subtle movements in the darkness. I thought it was just tricks of my mind trying to create patterns in the void. "Watch carefully." The presence at my side gently guided me. "What do you see?" As I concentrated, the shadows began to take shape. It was scary at first. Figures that moved like smoke in the air, some denser, others almost transparent. But then, little by little, I began to make out details, and my heart sank at what I saw. Are they people?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "They are souls," the presence confirmed. "Take a closer look." As my vision became clearer, I began to see details that left me perplexed. I saw an elderly priest, still wearing his black cassock, holding a rosary so tightly that his spiritual fingers were white. He walked in circles, repeating Latin prayers over and over, completely oblivious to the light in the distance. Next to him, a young nun sobbed silently, clutching a crucifix. "But I followed all the rules," she murmured over and over. "I fasted, I prayed, I served. Why am I here?" I saw a pastor, who must have been imposing in life and still gesturing as if he was preaching, even though no one was listening to him. "This is the way," he proclaimed with conviction, pointing in the opposite direction of the light. Some souls followed him, forming a procession that was lost in the darkness. "I don't understand," I said to my guiding presence. "These people seem to have been devout in life. Why are they here, lost in the darkness?" "Look more closely," the presence responded. "What do you notice they all have in common?" I watched longer and began to notice a pattern. Each soul seemed to be tied to something, an object, a ritual, a specific belief. It was as if they had created their own spiritual prisons. Are they trapped by their own convictions? I ventured. Exactly, the presence confirmed. And there is more. What is the proportion of what you see? I looked around, trying to count. It was a huge crowd, and as I watched, a knowledge simply dawned on me. 97% are Christians, I said, surprised by the accuracy of this understanding. Yes, the presence responded with a note of sadness. These souls dedicated their earthly lives to what they believed to be God's way. But look, some don't even notice the light. Others see it but reject it, convinced that it cannot be the true way because it is different from what they have always believed. I saw a woman who seemed to have been an ardent devotee in life. She held a Bible to her chest and rocked it back and forth, reciting verses. When a ray of distant light touched her, she flinched, as if it hurt her. But it's not fair, I protested. They tried to do right. They dedicated their lives to faith. Yes, the presence interrupted gently, but they confused the form with the essence. See that group over there? I looked in the direction indicated and saw a small group of souls arguing heatedly about interpretations of sacred scriptures, so absorbed in their theological debates that they seemed completely blind to the light that shone not far away. They turned the search for God into a set of rules and rituals, the presence continued. They forgot that the true spiritual path is about love, compassion, and genuine connection with the divine. They didn't realize that sometimes their own certainties can become obstacles on the path to the light. As I watched those lost souls, I felt a deep sadness. But I also understood something fundamental. True spirituality is not in the rituals we practice or the words we proclaim, but in opening the heart to an authentic connection with the divine. As we watched those lost souls, I felt the presence beside me intensify. It was as if she wanted to make sure I was ready to understand something even deeper. That's when I began to receive a series of understandings that flowed directly into my consciousness, like crystal clear water filling an empty vessel. What do you mean by serving God? The presence asked me softly. I hesitated. There, in that state of pure existence, the ready-made answers I knew seemed empty. I always thought it was about following the commandments, going to church, saying prayers. Watch, the presence directed me, and suddenly I saw a series of scenes unfolding before me. I saw an elderly woman who had never set foot in a church, but who cared for abandoned cats with so much love that her every gesture was a silent prayer. I saw a simple man who shared his lunch with homeless people without ever mentioning the name of God, but manifesting the divine in every sincere smile. I saw a child comforting a friend who had fallen on the playground, showing more genuine compassion in that simple gesture than many adults do in their elaborate prayers. Now, watch this, the presence indicated, and the scenes changed. I saw a famous pastor preaching to thousands of people. His words were eloquent, his biblical quotations impeccable, but I could see how opaque his soul was, concerned more with numbers and appearances than with true spiritual connection. I saw a devotee who spent hours praying but ignored the suffering of her own family. I saw religious leaders arguing over details of rituals while ignoring the real needs of their congregations. Are you beginning to understand? The presence asked. I think so, I replied, feeling the tears I couldn't cry in that spiritual state. It's as if we've confused the map with the territory. Explain better, encouraged the presence. It's as if religions, rituals, prayers were maps to help us find God, but at some point we started worshipping the maps instead of taking the journey. Yes, the presence responded, and I felt something like a smile in its energy. And what else? The people I saw first, they weren't trying to be religious or spiritual. They just loved, they served, they cared. It was natural, like breathing. In that moment, I received an understanding so profound it was almost painful. True service to God needed no name, no label. It was simply the natural flow of divine love through our actions, thoughts, and feelings. But then, I asked, why do we have religions? Why are there so many teachings, so many rules? The paths are many, the presence explained patiently, because human beings are many and diverse. Religions are like different languages, trying to express the same fundamental truth. The problem is not with the paths themselves, but with how people use them travel. I then saw a beautiful image, different paths of different colors and textures, all converging towards the same light in the distance. Some were straight, others winding, some felt harder, others softer, but everyone, without exception, could lead to the same light. The mistake, continued the presence, is in thinking that your path is the only valid one, or in worrying so much about the rules of the path that you forget the purpose of the journey. This revelation made me look again at the souls lost in darkness with even greater compassion. They weren't there because they were bad or didn't have enough faith. They were there because they got lost among the maps, forgetting to make the true journey of the heart. True connection with God, the presence concluded, is like the love between a mother and child. It doesn't need protocols, it doesn't need rituals, it just is. And when you experience this genuine connection, every moment becomes a prayer, every action becomes an act of devotion, every encounter becomes sacred. It was at that moment that the presence that accompanied me began to take on a more defined shape. Suddenly, there it was, an indescribable being of light. It wasn't like the angels we see in paintings or statues. He had no wings or traditional human appearance. It was more like a luminous form that radiated love and wisdom in a way that words cannot express. The light emanating from it was unlike anything I have ever seen on earth. It didn't hurt my eyes. In fact, I don't even know if I was seeing with my eyes at that moment. It was a light that seemed to come from within, as if every particle of that being was made of pure golden light. The most incredible thing is that this light not only illuminated the surrounding space, but also seemed to dissolve the darkness wherever it passed. When he communicated with me, it was not through spoken words. It was more like his thoughts flowed directly into my consciousness, and the first understanding I received was about heaven. He showed me that everything we thought we knew about paradise was far from reality. It was not a physical place with pearly gates or streets of gold. It was a completely different dimension of existence. Heaven, he explained to me, is a state of total union with divine love. There are no hierarchies there. There are no separations or divisions. It is a state of being where all souls recognize each other as part of the same unity, where love flows freely and understanding is complete. It's not a place we go after we die. It's a state of consciousness we can begin to experience while we're still alive. The angel showed me that many of the ideas we have about heaven are based on limited human concepts. We try to imagine paradise using earthly references as if it were an improved version of Earth. But the reality is much deeper and more wonderful. It's like trying to explain colors to someone who's never seen them. There aren't enough words. His presence brought such a deep peace that it made me understand why the angels in Scripture always began their messages by saying, "Do not be afraid." There was something in his nature that dissolved any fear or worry, replacing them with a deep understanding and a sense of complete belonging to the universe. While in the presence of the angel, he began to show me some visions that, I confess, I am only now beginning to understand better. It was as if he wanted to warn me about changes that were coming to humanity, especially about something he called the age of screens. In the vision, I saw people, thousands of them, constantly looking at small rectangular objects in their hands. It was strange because in 1982, nothing like it existed, at least not in that form. I saw people walking on the streets without looking where they were going, totally absorbed in these devices. I saw families sitting at the table, each person immersed in their own screen, not talking to each other. The most disturbing thing was the energy that emanated from these people. It was as if he could see their souls becoming increasingly opaque, further away from their true essence. The angel showed me how these screens, although they could be useful, were becoming a kind of invisible prison. People looked to them for comfort that was only temporary, for a connection that was only illusory. I saw people lying in their beds late at night, their faces illuminated by the bluish light from these devices, feeling increasingly alone, even though they were theoretically connected with the whole world. It was as if the more they connected through these screens, the more they disconnected from themselves and others around them. The angel showed me how this technology, which was supposed to bring people together, was actually creating a different kind of loneliness. People were losing the ability to form true connections, to look into each other's eyes, to feel the real presence of another human being. It was as if they were exchanging gold for shiny jewelry. The saddest thing was seeing how people didn't seem to realize what they were missing. I saw children growing up not knowing how to play without these screens. I saw relationships falling apart because people preferred virtual company to real life. I saw precious moments in life being lost because someone was more concerned with recording the moment than with truly living it. Another vision that the angel showed me was about the young people of the future, and I confess that this was one of the most painful parts of the entire experience. I saw an entire generation of young people who seemed to be losing their very essence, their deepest identity. In the vision, these young people were constantly looking for something, but looking in the wrong places. It was like seeing thirsty people drinking salt water. The more they drank, the thirstier they felt. I saw young people constantly changing their appearance, as if they were trying on different masks but never truly finding themselves beneath them. What impressed me most was the deep loneliness they carried, even though they were always connected. I saw groups of teenagers sitting together, but each isolated in their own virtual world. I saw young people posting smiles on their screens while crying inside. It was as if they had lost the ability to distinguish between the real and the artificial. The angel showed me how these young people were moving further and further away from fundamental spiritual values. It wasn't a question of specific religion, but of connection to something greater than themselves. I saw how they sought meaning in likes and comments, how they measured their value by the number of followers, how they confused attention with true love. The mental confusion of these young people was evident. I saw how they struggled with questions of identity in a way that no previous generation had experienced. It was like they had thousands of options about who to be, but no real guidance on how to find their true essence. The saddest thing was seeing how many of these young people felt completely lost, but didn't know how to ask for help. I saw some searching for answers in substances that only sunk them deeper, others isolating themselves in ever more elaborate virtual worlds, and still others blindly following anyone who seemed to offer a modicum of direction, even if that direction took them down even more confusing paths. The next vision that the angel showed me focused on the churches, and I confess that it was something that moved me deeply. I saw huge temples, bigger and more modern than anything we knew in 1982. They were impressive places, with sophisticated sound systems, giant screens, and thousands of people. But there was something deeply disturbing about these churches of the future. It was as if I could see two overlapping realities: the superficial one, full of loud music, elaborate presentations, and rousing sermons, and the spiritual, which showed an immense void beneath all that spectacle. I saw pastors who looked more like television hosts than spiritual leaders. They talked about material prosperity, as if it were the only goal of faith. They turned deep messages into superficial catchphrases. They treated the Word of God as if it were a product to be sold. The saddest thing was to see that many of them really believed they were doing the right thing. The congregations had also changed. I saw people who went to church as if they were going to a concert or a motivational talk. They were looking for quick relief from their anxieties, a magical solution to their problems, but they were not really interested in a deep spiritual transformation. It was as if the church had become more of a place of entertainment than of true connection with God. The angel showed me how many of these churches had turned into true companies, concerned more with numbers and growth than with people's true spiritual well-being. I saw how money had become a driving force behind many decisions, how the original message of love and compassion had been diluted into something more palatable and less challenging. The most painful thing was seeing how people left these cults. They seemed temporarily energized, as if they had taken a dose of a spiritual stimulant, but it didn't last. It was a never-ending cycle of seeking more and more of these superficial experiences, without ever achieving the true peace and connection that their souls so desperately craved. When all these visions were over, the angel gave me one last understanding about free will. It was as if he wanted to reassure me that, despite all the difficult changes to come, humanity would always have the ability to choose its path. Free will, he showed me, was the greatest gift God gave us, and nothing, not even the most advanced technology, could take it away from us unless we ourselves chose to give it up. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. It was like being pulled back, a sensation of movement so quick I could barely process it. Suddenly, the sounds of the world returned, the ambulance sirens, the agitated voices, the noise of the city. I felt intense pain running through my body, and I opened my eyes to see Graham's worried face above me. I discovered later that I was dead for approximately 3 minutes. For doctors, it was a classic case of cardiac arrest caused by the trauma of the accident. For me, it was 3 minutes that completely changed my understanding of life. The physical recovery was difficult. I had several fractures and needed months of physical therapy, but the real transformation was internal. How do you go back to living normally after an experience like that? How do you keep pretending that the world is only what our eyes can see? Many people ask me if after that I became a religious person. The truth is that I have become a more spiritual person, but not in the traditional sense. I learned that true spirituality is not in rituals or dogmas, but in the way we live each moment, in how we treat each other, in how we maintain our connection with something greater than ourselves. I never wanted to make this a big public event. I didn't write books. I didn't give talks. I didn't found any groups. I only share my story when I feel someone needs to hear it, because I learned that each person has their own path of discovery, their own time of understanding. My experience was just that, my experience. But if it can help others look beyond the superficial to seek a deeper connection with the divine, then it will be worth sharing.